Have you ever had a problem with your double bass buzzing? You're not alone. I've certainly had that problem over the years. I had a bass that drove me crazy. There was like a different buzz for every week, it seemed. And I was so happy to see this video with Jeff Chalmers of Discover Double Bass and Elinore Morris pop up. It's all about how to diagnose buzzes on your double bass. And so let's go through it and watch this together and learn how we can figure these buzzes out. We dig into topics like this every week in our email and newsletter. If you're not subscribed, consider doing so. Links in the description below.
We are in the workshop of the wonderful Swedish bass maker, Elinore Morris. So thank you, Elinore, for welcoming us to your absolutely incredible workshop here outside Gothenburg in Sweden.
Thank you for coming.
Well, it's been terrific. And we have one of your instruments on the bench. This is an instrument that you made just very recently. How old is this beautiful double bass?
Days old.
Days old.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's been made for the wonderful bass player Magnus Bergstrom, and he has very kindly let us use it for this quick video where we're going to look at the common causes of buzzes on double basses. So is this a common problem for double bass players?
Very common.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So I'm not alone, because I have this terrible problem when my bass starts buzzing, which is I can't do anything else except find that buzz. And that has been a problem for me for ever since I've been playing the bass. I remember I would be at college practicing and some buzz would happen. I had this 1880s Lowendahl, and the practice session would stop, and it would just involve me like tapping on my bass and pushing on things, and just absolutely I could have no peace.
Yeah.
When I had a teacher once, Stuart Riley, when I was younger, and he said to me, Jeff, if you own a bass, it's like owning a car. There's always a really annoying buzz or rattle, and you can never work out where it's coming from. But what are the common causes when people come to you?
Because people call me up and say they've got a buzz, and they're like, my heart sinks. Because we can spend an hour or longer or looking through it and not find anything. But there's some things that it's good to know, just to have like a little checklist.
Yes, checklists are super helpful, and I've put together some videos on other bass checklists, which I will link up to in the description below and up here somewhere. I think that that's a good way to not go crazy, is just have a checklist and go through whether it's something weird happening in your technique or bass buzzes like this checklist. Yes.
So that if you do have a buzz, you can go through these things and rule out things.
Where do you start?
Yeah, maybe let's start at this end.
Okay.
We have like this beautiful new Endpin here. Sometimes they are the ones that have that you can screw on. Sometimes on the floor they've like just wiggled a little loose, and it's sitting a little loose on the winding and the threads there. So that's the first thing to.
Yeah, I've had that happen all the time. I'm like, what is going on? And then I realize, oh, my Endpin. And for whatever reason, this Getz style Endpin that I typically use, just the straight Endpin, and I've done videos on Endpins, which I guess I'll link up to since she's talking about it. But that is something that buzzes all the time on mine if I'm not real careful. So it's just a habit now. Every time I take my bass out to practice, I make sure that thing's completely tight.
Check that that's sitting.
I've absolutely had that.
And obviously that this is tight enough. Sometimes there'll be a resonance in the Endpin itself.
Yes.
And changing sometimes you can just cut off a little bit. Maybe you've got an extra long one, and
yeah, the long Endpins can be a real bummer. Now, you don't want your Endpin too short, because then if you decide to stand and you usually sit, then that's a problem. But long Endpin, I know several players, myself included, that have had problems with that and resonance or buzzing or weird rattles.
For some reason, there's a resonant frequency going on.
So it's the spike inside the chamber of the double bass is resonant, and I've had that, and it's quite a specific sound, and I've diagnosed it by then putting the spike back in, playing again, and taking some spikes you can actually fully remove, which is even more helpful.
A tip is because not all of them you can.
Yeah.
Because they've got a little thing so that you don't lose them.
Yes.
But
that drives me insane though when you can't fully remove it, because then how do you use a wheel? A wheel, my best friend for transporting a bass.
If you're visiting your luthier and you know that in the future you might want to take it out, without taking all the strings off.
Yes.
Just say, oh, please, could you just cut the little tag
safety
thing off?
Good tip.
Even that, I mean, on some, I've even had that rattle.
Really?
Yeah, but it's not on like good quality new things, but on
certainly on older spikes, and I think Endpin mechanisms sometimes they can be a little loose and somehow resonating with the instrument. That's a great place to start. Where's the next place that we take to look at?
We had a bass. Actually, it's in the other room being glued right now, and it had that typical. There's something wrong with the Endpin. There's like this metallic buzz, and it wasn't the Endpin. It was open here.
Oh, the seam.
Whoa.
Which happens it happens very often on basses like this. If your bass is going to be open, this is like, it's most likely going to be.
And I am so lucky. I think you can probably see my bass in the frame over there. This Jackstat bass, and I've done a video just about this bass. It has been, knock on wood, it has been a remarkably buzz-free. But maybe 10 years ago, I started to get a buzz, just like she's describing, and I started freaking out. I was like, what the heck is going on? And the wonderful luthier Aaron Riley happened to be just traveling through Chicago. That was living in Chicago at the time, and he checked it out, and it was just what she was describing. The seam was open, but it was so barely open. You couldn't see like that it was open. It didn't even really rattle like it was open. And you can go around your bass and knock. She may show this on the video, although I don't know if anything's open on her bass. Probably not. But there is like a kind of like a thwacky sound it sounds different when you rap on a seam. You knock on a seam that's open. But my bass wasn't doing that, so it was so baffling. But it was such a minor thing. Aaron Riley just glued my bass like literally in the street and gave it back to me, and it was great. So I have been fortunate since getting this bass. I have not had many bass buzzes in my life, but my first good bass, oh my goodness, it was just a constant nightmare.
Here, and that's because of the way the wood shrinks. It shrinks in different directions, and then the high glue just pops open. So sometimes you don't hear anything. You will be unaware of it for months.
Oh no.
And I mean, and then other times there's something, there's a buzz, and you can't even see it because there's like some tension in the wood that's pressing it together.
Okay.
So you have to go with your thumbnail or a little like feeler gauge or something.
Yeah.
And just another thing is you could just tapping along the
There it
edge,
is.
and you can hear it directly.
Yeah, that was the advice I had. So
Yeah.
I would do this, and then it would go.
Yeah.
It would change
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
pitch.
Yeah.
That's a great way to find
Yeah.
an open seam,
Yeah.
which is very common.
Because sometimes the wood will bend outwards, and then usually you don't get a sound.
Yeah, and that's one of the most common causes of buzzes, and you actually want your bass to open up like that. People might think, well, why don't we just glue the heck out of it, and then that won't happen. But the wood will give when it needs to give, and if it doesn't pop a seam, a crack is probably the next thing that would happen, and cracks are much, much worse than open seams. Basses are meant to be openable stringed instruments so that people can get in and work on them. And yes, it is annoying to have open seams, but it is better than the alternative. And weather changes just have an inevitable effect on string instruments, particularly in climates that fluctuate a lot. So that's one of many, many reasons to find a bass luthier in your area and befriend them, and just get in the habit of, like, you take your car in, take your bass in to a luthier and have a regular checkup.
Okay.
But you can experience there's less volume in the bass. There's like it's not itself. It's not the sound that you're used to, and it's because it's open. And other times it'll bend the other way, and you won't be able to see that it's open until you like knock, and then it's like an overnight gluing job.
And it's not a big deal for a trained luthier like yourself to reglue a seam, is it? So people need to just get into there, find their local luthier, and make sure that they get that done, because it keeps the bass nice and healthy, I guess.
Once you get that buzz diagnosed, you're going to want to start practicing again, and that's where getting a good bass rosin is key. And I've been having such a great time using the rosin from today's sponsor, Upton Bass. Their Upton Bass rosin comes in Maple and Maple Plus, and and they're both great. I've been using them both. They both are somewhere between Pops and like a Swedish rosin like Carlson. I'd say that Maple Plus is even closer to Pops. It's a wonderful product, affordable price, and their honey rosin is like a finishing rosin. Very cool concept. Upton knocks out of the park with whatever they do, and I have really been digging this rosin. Check it out. Links in the description below, and thank you, Upton, for sponsoring the video.
And then moving up, does a tailpiece ever cause any issues? Maybe not so much.
Not so much, unless you've got like a lot of equipment here.
But that's
yeah, and I have a quick tail. By the way, if you don't want my commentary, I will. It's probably obvious, but I will link up to this video, and you should. If you're not, I can't imagine you would not be subscribed to Discover a Little Bass. But if you're not, definitely give them a follow and give Elinore a follow too. That's all linked up. I have never had problems with my tailpiece buzzing, but I did have a tailpiece break on me once, and the wonderful Gael McKeon, a luthier that's now on the East Coast of the United States, was in France briefly, but he used to be in Berkeley here in the Bay Area, and he just totally saved my bacon. I heard a weird sound one night, and then the next day I had a gig about 2-hour drive from San Francisco, go to pick up my bass, and I hear all sorts of like bad sounds, and sure enough, my tailpiece had just cracked in half overnight. That was the weird sound I had heard. I was new to town. I didn't have another bass. I didn't really know a lot of people, and Gael picked up the phone. He had me in. I got a new tailpiece, and that's the only problem I've ever had with a tailpiece. But that does make sense what they're talking about with having a lot of gear in your tailpiece could cause problems.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I find with a full circle, sometimes this thing can really be a pain. Yeah. And I often, if there's more room and there's the windings stop, I sometimes move it up or I move it further down, and that can be enough to stop a rattle. Or sometimes just this, the placement of that can be, you know.
Yeah.
And what about the bridge itself? Does that ever cause any problems?
Well, bridge adjusters sometimes, I mean, good ones they won't, that are properly installed, they won't do that, but sometimes you get metal ones that sit in a little, they sit in a little chamber thing.
Oh, okay.
And
interesting.
Sometimes they can just rattle loose. And yeah, I've sometimes, it's buzzing. Can you, yeah, it's like, oh.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Wow.
But usually you have to take the strings off and just make sure that it's functioning properly. There's something amiss there, but it can.
Sometimes that little bit of just adjusting ever so slightly, and it's the same with the strings as well. I sometimes find that taking a string off and you put it back on and you bring it up to tension, and you've got some kind of rattle coming from the.
Jeff has a lot of experience with the buzzing too. These are seasoned professional tips and observations. Yeah, the buzzes can be very mysterious. The source and then the solution, and you'll think it's one of those patches inside your bass. If you have a bass that has a lot of cracks, it's often not that. It might be something as simple as what Elinore just said with a bridge adjuster, just a little adjustment in that, or taking your strings off, putting them back on, or putting a new set of strings on.
The peg box, which we'll speak about in a moment, but just letting a bit of tension off, letting it back up again, a little bit of finagling. Sometimes you don't need to go to the luthier if you can just kind of cure it that way if you're lucky, but other times not so much.
Yeah, it's good to have like a little
checklist.
A little checklist. If you can do it yourself, that's great. Otherwise, yes, we're here.
So moving up the instrument, what else is there that you'd be looking for? Is there are there other issues? You mentioned to me earlier about this end of the bass.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, fingerboard buzzers, that's a whole a subject in itself.
Yes, and fingerboards are a fascinating and kind of complicated topic. They'll probably get into it slightly here, but the wonderful luthier in Houston, Texas, Joey Nager, he and I had a whole chat on the podcast years ago about fingerboards and fingerboard buzzing and dressing your fingerboard. And yeah, that's just going to crop up as you play. Even with an ebony fingerboard, you will start to develop little divots like where your fingers land, and just having your fingerboard dressed, they call it, just planed down ever so slightly by a luthier every few years. That's just part of the game with being a bass player. And sadly, your fingerboard gets a little bit thinner every time you do that. So I have I don't know how many more dressings I have in this fingerboard before I have to get a new fingerboard, which then introduces a whole other host of problems. The life of a bass player, it's so dramatic.
And if there's like a problem with the fingerboard, then you need a luthier to
shape the.
Yeah. but there's like some things that can happen here. You can get a buzz on the string here that can either be because the string has sunk in lower down in the nut.
I see.
And sometimes you see there's still like a little, if you look here, there's still a little step between the nut and the fingerboard. But then you take your straight edge and you put it there and you see, then it goes like down and then it goes up.
Yeah, and those buzzes are particularly infuriating because they're right next to your ear. And I don't know if they'll get into extension buzzes. That maybe not, because this bass doesn't have an extension. But I had not my current extension, thank goodness, knock on wood. But my first extension on my old bass, it would buzz, and like the closer would buzz, and that's just like right up against your ear. And I just couldn't think about anything else except that buzz. I probably lost many an audition just because I would get so neurotic and obsessed with those buzzes. So extension buzzes can drive you crazy too, or these nut-related or nut-adjacent buzzes.
And
so
down
it's
again.
worn away and then created a bump that then causes a buzz or a rattle.
And if it's important that the string starts vibrating at the end of the nut. Sometimes if the channel here is misformed, it starts vibrating halfway up, and then you're going to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest causes for me in my experience, or areas that have caused buzzes, has been around the scroll and the peg box, and certainly the machines. Even sometimes loosening off the pitch and going back up to tension has caused on an older instrument like my bass, where the peg box is a real mess. This is beautifully made, and so I imagine that Magnus won't.
Yeah, older basses have a lot of quirks, but I'll tell you, new basses have some quirks too. And even when you have a brand new set of tuners, there can be just something. It's just not a perfect science that we're dealing with all these things, and the slightest misalignment can cause a buzz. So I like how they're starting down at the tail. At the end pin rather, and going all the way up the bass. That is a good way to do this for sure.
Don't have any problems here, but where do you look in terms of the strings and the machines? Do they commonly cause problems?
I mean, normally when the strings are at tension, they shouldn't cause any problems. What can do is that some of the little screws can shake loose. Now I've done these are blind. They don't have the little connectors at the other end. What can happen is that with those connectors is that they can go loose. If this what is it called?
The steel rod between. So we're talking about that goes from the machine through the scroll or the peg box. You won't be able to see it from the cameras here. But so the steel rod
they can also be slightly misaligned. Fortunately, my jack set's nice and straight with those. But my old bass, and I've seen this in many student basses, they can be a little bit misaligned. So if there is that little piece on the other side that you're talking about, and you'll see that in a lot of basses, that can buzz. Just over time, it can buzz. If it's not perfectly at a 90-degree angle, that can buzz, and these things can all shift as instruments age and get banged around. And there's just a whole mess of buzzes that can happen up in the scroll.
Sometimes cut all the way through the scroll.
Yeah, and then sometimes it's a bit too short. And so then this comes loose, and you tighten it up, but there's a little gap there. And then when you wind down the string, it kind of unwinds, because there's a screw there, and the screw unwinds itself. And then, so it can either just loosen when you're tuning, it can either loosen itself, or it can get tighter. And you change your strings, and you tune them up, and it gets stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. And that's
interesting.
And you got to watch that because it can pop off.
And what about, in terms of machines, the German hat peg style? Because I find sometimes, on older machines, it's not strict to those, but the older ones, often I can find little mechanical weird things that are causing buzzes. But the hat peg ones, you find that causes more of a problem, or is that no issue? It's just another design that can be good or bad and wear over time.
The hat pegs, they do wear. And it's quite easy to change them out, and you can just get somebody. I mean, if you see that yours is worn, you can just, it doesn't have to be a luthier, it can be someone with a lathe. You just ask them to copy.
I definitely know bass players that had a lot of weird problems with the hat peg tuners that they're describing. They look cool, but yeah, but this is good advice from Elinore.
That you can like and replace it. That's not a difficult thing to do.
Well, Elinore, thank you so. Was there any other buzzes?
I just want to say something about the ones that are harder to get.
Yeah.
And perhaps the ones that you have to come is. Around the bass bar, there's a lot of vibrations happening.
Oh,
so
that's the bass player's nightmare.
I know. These are the ones that'll drive you bananas, especially if you have an older instrument. Although again, it can happen on any instrument, but these harder to get ones, I've been there.
I'm going to have to take the top off to fix this.
Yeah. So it's like the most difficult. You have this kind of like papery buzz, and it's like it sounds like it's here, and it's like, oh, let me just press it there. Oh, it's disappeared. Why has it disappeared? Because you've stopped the vibration, the vibration of the bass bar. So.
And you'll just think you're convinced you know where that buzz is, and it's just not where that buzz is. Oh my goodness. And I have had, again, not on the Jackstat, knock on wood, with that older bass, I had the top taken off several times to get at some of those buzzes, and it's really hard to tell if you're going to have solved the problem. So if you can avoid taking the top off, definitely do so. It is definitely open heart surgery on the bass. It does have to happen from time to time, but just keeping your bass properly humidified and just good care and maintenance and regular trips to a luthier will hopefully let you avoid some of these particularly infuriating problems like they're describing.
There are cracks that you can't see on the outside that are open on the inside sometimes. And I've had them here. You've got a lot of movement around the F-hole.
Yeah, so it's just on this side so we can see for the...
Sorry.
Yeah.
So it can be glued fine here, but there's like a little gap on the inside between the top and the lining, and it's just enough for it to. There can also be like a thin cracks here.
Yes.
You can't see them from the outside, but they're there, and
And the other one that I've experienced previously is old repair work that hasn't been done well by luthiers of the past, and it's then coming unglued, and then the player needs to take their instrument apart.
That's the.
It must be incredible what you find in these old basses when you take the top off. But luckily, we have this beautiful new bass, and if you want to learn,
it's such a frustrating topic. I just love watching each of their reactions.
More about Elinor's basses. Where can people go and find you online? You've got a really good website as well. What's it called?
ElinorMorris.com.
Fantastic.
There's another thing that I can just advertise for. Arnold Schnitzer has made a book about.
Yeah, and we have this book, The Handy Double Bassist. We actually sell this in our sheet music store. I will put a link in the description below. And we've done a video with Arnold about it too.
Your bass.
The Handy Double Bass? Handy Double Bassist?
Yes,
that's the title.
And that's
Arnold's a genius, isn't he? And, and
Arnold's one of a kind.
That. Now, I don't have a copy, but I need to get one.
Oh, you can buy. I've got.
Oh, great! Have you really?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, well, I'll buy a copy.
I'm not selling them myself, but I've got them. They're available here.
Oh, fantastic!
I got number 2.
Well, I think they have them on Chain of Sound's website.
Yes,
I'm seeing them on there as well.
Yeah.
So we'll provide links for Chain of Sound. It's great.
So that is for the European market.
So if you wanna check out more about this topic, this is probably a good place to close out my video. Check out the video I did with Arnold about the Handy Double Bassist, and we'll have that linked up to our sheet music store as well. Obviously, you're following Discover Double Bass if you're watching this channel, but if you're not, goes without saying, hopefully. But give them a follow, give Elinore a follow. She's got a YouTube channel too, and we will see you in the next one.